Good afternoon. My name is Ines Pierce, and I'm Chief Executive of Pierce Global Partners. And I'd just like you to imagine for a moment. A week from now, you're getting ready for work, you leave, headed your way, and every business that you encounter on your way to work is closed. Every single one. Could be where you get your coffee, which could be a disaster for you that day. But your banks, grocery stores, any business that you encounter is closed for the entire day. How would that change your day? Would you have power? Would you have water? Would you be able to get anything accomplished that day when it comes to work? And would your own business be closed? Probably. But if you're in government, how would that impact you? Now let's imagine that those businesses are closed for a week. No business for an entire week. Or a month. How would that impact you? This is just to get you thinking, because the fact of the matter is every community is reliant on the businesses that are in operation on a daily basis. We are reliant. 99% of the businesses in a community are small. So we need them to be operational. It's important for our communities to be able to have these businesses functional after a disaster especially, but even on a daily basis when the lights should be on and the power and water working. So I'm going to talk to you about a solution, an approach that can help communities everywhere. So small businesses and communities are interrelated. We're connected. And when it comes to resilience, it's not something that's being incorporated in a daily basis in the businesses and also into the community itself in many cases. We're growing these communities, we're building in areas that maybe we're not supposed to be building in. We're making decisions that potentially are making our communities more vulnerable. So in particular, here's an example of homes that are about to be a part of a landslide. Now, if you're a business and these are your employees' homes, what's the likelihood that they're coming back to work anytime soon? Probably not very great. So the decisions that are being made at the community level could be impacting your business as well. So when you look at the numbers, average daily losses to businesses for a small company is around $3,000. Medium size, $23,000. And for a large company, it could be $84,000 on average per day, or per hour in that case. Now, for large companies to look at a small business and think $3,000, well, that's not that much in the U.S., it is significant. And when you look at other parts of the world, that number could be less, but what a significant impact that would be on that business. So it can be something that adds up very quickly to the small business. So these losses don't include the economic impacts in the community. They don't include the diaspora, the people who leave the community, which could be both the customers of the business, but also could be the workforce that has to leave because maybe the area is not safe anymore, or they have to relocate because their houses are damaged. That's not included in the disaster numbers. But we also know when it comes to businesses that less than 1 in 6 businesses prepared. Less than 1 in 6, and in some communities it's even less than that, where you have businesses that have not done any planning for disasters at all. And that sometimes includes the really large businesses as well. And the trend, as we can see, is that the disaster numbers are getting more and more significant. We know disasters are happening on a more regular basis. And if our communities aren't prepared, our businesses are not prepared, we are getting more vulnerable. When it comes to disasters for businesses, the issue that we have is that most businesses say it's not going to happen to me. And they hope it's going to happen to their competitor, but not to them. So they always think it's going to be someone else's problem until the disaster strikes them. And I will tell you, with all the businesses I've dealt with over many years, they all say the exact same thing. I wish I had. If I had only done this, my business would have survived, I would have had less damage, I would have had less losses. Unfortunately, they have to get hit by disaster to be able to be convinced that they need to take these steps. But we know disasters happen all the time. Fire is the most likely disaster that they're to experience. But it could be flooding, and with climate change, we're seeing flooding becoming a more real, regular occurrence in many communities. earthquakes, it could be anything. And it's not necessarily something that impacts their business directly. It could be something that's happening in the community that impacts them. So maybe their business is fine, but they're vulnerable because of what's happening in the community or decisions that are being made in the community. So what we do know is that businesses who do take action, ones that do take some steps, are much quicker to recover and help the community overall. There were some Mexican fishermen that were hit by a hurricane, and they invested in risk management, and 3 years later another hurricane occurred, and they protected their losses around, on average, about $25,000 per fisherman. About $54 million was spent by a power company in New Zealand. And when Christchurch happened, they were able to protect the losses of around $45 million. So we know the investments that are made in advance actually protect the businesses in the future. So resilience does make a difference. So I'm representing a public-private partnership that's led by Ed Martinez from the UPS Foundation and other partners here, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, the World Economic Forum, the Disaster Resistant Business Toolkit Work Group. And we really saw these issues with businesses in the communities and the reliance that if there's something we could do that will help communities, we wanted to start there. And Turkey was our pilot, and we brought in CSR Turkey as our boots on the ground partner to make that happen. And we leveraged all these partners to be able to pull in resources at the local level that really became our advisory board, the group that really were looking at the different issues and really customizing for the culture in Turkey. And that's public, private, nonprofit, universities, everybody. The whole community is involved. And the idea there is that if there's something we can learn in Turkey that could be shared anywhere in the world, places that don't have the advantage of having partnerships already established, or if we could take what we've developed and make it easy for someone else to make their business prepared, we wanted to make that happen. And that's where the concept for Resilience in a Box came. And it's to take these simple paths, these simple ideas, tools, tips, and resources that could make businesses more resilient. So with that, you've got a handout, and it walks through the different steps here. And I want to just give you some highlights on a few here. It's intended for the businesses that haven't taken any steps at all. But we've got 3 elements to Resilience in a Box: tools, training, and resources. I'm going to walk through each one. And that's the handout that you have. So in particular, tools is really the core of a lot of what we've developed. And we've got 3 levels: basic, intermediate, and advanced. The idea of Resilience in a Box is that this is something that can just be handed over to you. There's no cost associated with it for the basic and intermediate. And for those that want to go to the advanced level, there's a little bit of cost there, but through partnership, you can leverage those costs, so there's really nothing that's passed along to the businesses participating. But each is building on the previous level. So at the basic level, we have a resilience checklist. And this is really a self-assessment that a business can do to find out, okay, how are they going to fare? What is their score? What do they need to do? It's to open their eyes and really help them to figure out where they need to focus, because that's the most important thing, is to get them thinking about what they need to do. And it's to highlight those areas that need assistance. So that's what the checklists look like. Next we have, and we are translating this into these resources into Spanish, but we also have, under basic level, the top 20 tips. Simple things that businesses could do to make themselves better prepared. And it's things they can do before, during, and after, and how it can help minimize any interruptions that may occur. And so that's an example of the 20 tips. Now we take those basic tips and we move into the intermediate area. And that is looking at a Business Disaster Resilience 101. It's like a basic class by having this workbook. Look at more specific things that a business can do. Simple, again, very straightforward, but things that they could implement easily. And there are tips and tools. We always use those because you have to take the business where they are and look at different resources that they could use. We're using an all-hazard approach and a fillable PDF, again, to make it very simple. And it's something that can be sent, something that they could easily complete themselves. But particularly, we're dividing this up into 6. Every business can be divided into 6 critical areas. Every business has these same 6 areas: people, relationships, and brand. It's that human factor, but also how they present themselves and their company and their products, for instance, out in the community. Buildings, data, which is not only electronic, it's files, it's the information that they use, how they make decisions. Looking at operations, it's what they do on a daily basis, how they function. Inventory, not all businesses have inventory, but those that do, potentially it could be anywhere from 30 to 40 to 60% of their revenue annually is tied up in their revenue or in their inventory. And if that's the case, they know that that's an area they need to focus on first. But for others, that's not so much of an issue. And equipment. At least every business out there has at least one computer. So it's something that, again, for them, they pick and choose which is going to make the most sense, which they need to focus on. So at the advanced level, it's now building on those lower levels and looking at the advanced level, which is getting them to the point where they start to plan and start to look ahead. And here we have the Disaster Resistant Business, or DRB for short, workbook. It's a foundation for developing a business continuity plan and addresses the element of a plan, training, exercises, those things that we know businesses need to do. But if they normally probably wouldn't start at this level, but we can help them work to that point so they feel more comfortable. And it also helps them by providing different resources, the basics that every business has to have in their plan. And it's also a fillable PDF, and that the idea is it prepares them for the next phase in advance, which is looking at the DRB toolkit, which is a piece of software. And this is a plan building software that helps them to develop their plan. It's 100% customizable. They make it really simple. We've used it in a variety of settings. It has example videos and templates. So as they're going through the experience, they're actually building their plan in the process. Again, to make it as simple as possible. That's what we know works to get businesses moving forward. And in the end, they end up with their business continuity plan. So the next piece, the next element of Resilience in a Box is training. So we start with the basic training. How do you educate the businesses themselves so they understand what's needed? And it's an interactive approach. It talks about business continuity in very simplistic terms, but really helps them to understand their risk, because if they don't understand their risk, they're not going to see any need for taking action. You have to combine the two, hazard with the solutions. And then provides those available resources that they could use to make themselves more resilient and what their next steps might be. So they have to choose for themselves what's going to help their business. Then the next piece of training is train the trainer. We need people out in the community, building capacity. How do you get people out to reach the businesses? And we start with 3 levels. The first being, what's the importance? What's the value proposition to get these businesses to prepare? And it starts with, how do you build that value in the businesses themselves? The second piece is looking at understanding vulnerability in the basics again. So if they understand the value, now they can start looking at the solutions. And then how do you sell that basically in the community? How do you make businesses want to do this? And it's in the storytelling, stories of businesses and what they've done, how like-minded, similar businesses have prepared themselves. And it all directs them to those different resources that we have. And the last element is Resilience in a Box resources. And this is really sharing the expertise and experience of developing partnerships, looking at different things we've experienced, how to launch and maintain these partnerships, public education campaigns, how do you evaluate success. It's really to make it as simple as possible moving forward, so that if a community's never done anything like this before, they can get their questions answered and move forward. So with that, we know that for businesses, it's personal. This is how they move forward. This is how they look at the world. And so we need them to move forward and take steps to make themselves more resilient. But when they suffer, when a community is hit, when the businesses suffer, the community really suffers. So we want them to be better prepared. We've got a new partnership with Resilience in a Box. We started with Senesed. We formalized the partnership, and we're moving forward as a new partner here. And if you want to start a program in your own community, there's some very simple steps, but the main thing I want to leave you with is let us know how we can be of assistance, because when it comes down to it, we're all in this together. And if there's things we can do that can help your community, we want to share those things. So thank you very much. I know it's late in the day, and thank you very much for your attention.